How's it going, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Thorn's Jungle. Take a step in. Today, I'm feeling cryptozoological. Yesterday, I finally got round to editing the footage from Sumatra for when I went there to look for the orang pendek, which is a cryptid ape that is said to live in West Sumatra, in the jungles there. Said to be about 3 feet tall and walk bipedally like a man. So I finally edited that footage and it's now on YouTube. So if you go to Thorn's Jungle on YouTube, you can watch it there. It was a pretty epic task to edit. There was so much footage, but I could only really include the meat and potatoes. But it's still a fun video, so check that out. Today, I'm going to be talking about another cryptid it's a cool cryptid. I actually really like this one. And it's kind of surprising I haven't already done an episode on it. And that is the Ropen. So the Ropen is said to live in Papua New Guinea. And it is a winged animal. Allegedly looks like a pterosaur, like a pterodactyl type animal. And you would think that something like that can't really stay hidden, right? Well, you're wrong. Papua New Guinea is surprisingly unexplored by Western scientists. Pretty much every time a group of scientists go out there, they discover new species. And that's another spot where some people think that the thylacine or the Tasmanian tiger may still exist. The Tasmanian tiger used to live, thousands of years ago, it used to live on mainland Australia. Then it was isolated to Tasmania and then went extinct in Tasmania. But it was also found in Papua New Guinea. So if there's any sort of relic populations knocking about, Papua New Guinea would be a good place to look because a lot of that place is sort of uninhabited, especially up in the mountainous areas. So the Ropen is one of those dinosaurian cryptids. So when I say dinosaurian cryptids, a cryptozoological animal that resembles a dinosaur, even though pterosaurs weren't dinosaurs, they were prehistoric flying reptiles. But you get the gist. Another one of these dinosaurian cryptids would be the Mbembe, found in the Congo. And unlike a lot of these other dinosaurian cryptids, the Ropen wasn't sort of pushed on people by creationists. So young Earth creationists love these dinosaur cryptids. They love them because, in a way, they think this proves that the Earth is much younger than it really is and that humans lived alongside dinosaurs. For some reason, proving that some dinosaurs still exist would prove that God and Christianity is real. I don't quite know. I don't quite know how that would prove that the Earth is only 8,000 years old. But they seem to think that it will. So a lot of these people that go out looking for example, Mbembe, which is a long-necked dinosaur in the Congo, it's a lot of creationists that go out looking for this animal. And they kind of push the existence of these animals a lot. But I'm not saying that creationists invented Mbembe, but they sure as hell developed the storyline of it, right? And they have done to a certain degree with the Ropen, but the first sort of true sighting by Western eyes was by a scientist and not by a creationist. It was seen by a scientist that believed in evolution, which is really cool, and it makes a nice, refreshing change. And that scientist was Evelyn Cheeseman. Great name. Cheeseman! What an awesome name, Evelyn Cheeseman. And she spotted this alleged pterosaur-like animal in 1930. she reported mysterious glowing aerial lights lasting about 4 to 5 seconds. And these lights are attributed to the Ropen because apparently the Ropen bioluminesces, which is a very interesting trait. Mysterious lights have been seen all over the world. It's not just isolated to Papua New Guinea. We have the Min Min lights in Australia. In this one area in sort of remote Australia, you can quite consistently see lights coming out of the ground and into the sky and things like that. And it is a mystery because nobody really knows where they're coming from. It's not a case of the old swamp gas type thing. Obviously, there's the Phoenix lights that happened in, I believe it was 1996, over Phoenix and other parts, actually other states as well. They were seen. It was one night. Lights appeared and giant boomerang-shaped craft were seen flying quite low to the floor, and their wingspans stretched well over the size of a football field. It's one of the biggest mass sightings of UFOs. Right? So these are attributed to UAPs and UFOs. These lights aren't. These lights are said to be from a living, breathing animal, not a craft. And it's a pretty consistent description of the Ropen, the bioluminescence of this animal. The size of the Ropen kind of changes. There's been wingspans reported of 12 feet up to 100 feet. So there is a huge size inconsistency with this animal, but obviously not all animals of the same species are going to be the exact same size. But going from 12-foot wingspan to 100-foot is a huge size discrepancy. We can narrow that down to just people's scaling of certain things can be very far off. And a perfect example of that is a professor, I believe he was, took some students out and showed them a python, or it was an anaconda actually, so it was a boa. And I believe it was coiled up, and he got everybody, all the students, to estimate how long they think that snake is. It might have even been uncoiled, who knows, but he got them to estimate what they believe its size was, and the ranges went from like 12 foot to 50 feet. So people's, sizing and referencing and things like that can be so off depending on the individual. It's insane. So let's just put it down to that. Maybe even over exaggerating, people love to do that. But on average, the wing size tends to be about 25 foot, which is still, almost double the size of any extant bird that we have on planet Mars, Earth, whatever planet we apparently live on. It's been seen over the years, not only by Papua New Guineans or, people of that region, but a lot of soldiers, missionaries have seen them. And obviously the correlation between people doing missionary work and creationism is a factor in this, but, we shouldn't just disregard that because of that reason. In 1994, a guy called Dwayne Hodgkinson observed a large long-neck flying creature with an estimated 20-foot wingspan rising from the brush and flying away. So not only is there, physiological descriptions of this animal, size and its bioluminescence, things like that, but there's also behavioral ones. A lot of the locals say that the Ropen actually is a grave robber. It's been seen taking bodies out of newly dug graves and eating the carrion, which birds absolutely would. Obviously, if it's a pterosaur, it's a reptile. Reptiles would do it as well. But the main sort of diet that's been attributed to this animal is fish eater, which does make sense. That's a plausible diet for an animal like that. In 1971, Brian Hennessy, he was an alco, saw a dark, long-tailed flying creature with a prehistoric appearance while descending a mountain trail. In 1993, there was a daylight sighting of a large, long-tailed, featherless creature flying over Lake Pung, reported as distinctively non-bat-like. So a lot of the animals that people think these witnesses are seeing is the flying fox. And in Papua New Guinea and Northern Australia, Northern Queensland, there is types of flying fox bats. So they're the mega bats. They're big bats, biggest in the world, some of these flying foxes. They can get a wingspan of nearly 6 feet long, so they are huge bats. And seeing a bat with a near enough 6 foot wingspan flying around, it's going to be a shock, man. It's going to be a shock. So a lot of people think that the Ropen is just a misidentified flying fox. So this guy obviously has gone out of his way to say it wasn't bat-like. Pretty cool. In 1994, Jim Plume and Paul Nation, they were missionaries. A missionary-led expedition interviewing locals about glowing flyers gathered multiple reports of nocturnal lights. I don't know whether or not to just disregard missionary work or people that are, have that narrative, have that sort of ulterior motive. But if these people are out to prove something, then they're going to be trying their hardest to prove something. And if that is pterosaurs still exist and the Earth is 8,000 years old, then we can't really disregard their evidence. Although they do have an agenda, they're out there to try to prove something, so they're going to try and get the best evidence they can. So let's just still acknowledge their evidence, okay? Again, in 1996, Jim Plume and Carl Baugh, I can't pronounce that, Baugh, B-A-U-G-H, Carl Baugh, observed faint glowing lights on a cliff above mangroves. No structural details were seen. It's pretty crazy, actually. Camera crews have gone out looking for the Ropen. What was it? Might have been Josh Gates, his show. It might have been that. What was it? Expedition Unknown, or I can't remember the other one. Really cool show, by the way. Josh Gates is such a sick host. But I could be completely wrong. But it was a show like that. They actually caught these lights on camera. And they were very weird. Like, it moved how a lit up flying animal would move, right? So like bobbing around and things like that. It was pretty interesting. In 2002, Jonathan Whitcomb, Garth Gessman, and David Wetzel went on a series of expeditions collecting eyewitness interviews, local sketches, and video recordings of nocturnal lights. There is actually a lot of these video recordings of these lights. And you know what? Like, it does sound weird, but it's surprisingly easy to film the sky and see moving lights. Now, I'm not being facetious or condescending here. I'm not saying, you can film an aeroplane flying through the sky and say, look at these lights. No. I often go out the front of my house and stare up in the sky and often see lights moving around up there. Not satellites. No. Not satellites. I know what a satellite looks like. These are moving lights. They look like stars, but they're flying around. Not shooting stars either. Like, it's bizarre. I filmed one like 2 weeks ago. And then a few months before, I saw multiple ones flying around up there and like going super quick at times and things like that. And they're certainly not drones either. Way too high. So there is a lot of stuff moving up there. Whether it's man-made or not, who knows? But yeah, it is actually quite easy to point your camera up at the sky and see lights moving around. The interesting thing with these lights are that they are so distinctive, as I was saying. They do bob around and move around like they would be a flying animal that is illuminated. All right. 2004, the Genesis Park team. Now, I do know the Genesis Park team are creationists, like straight up, and I'll tell you about that soon. 3-week expedition interviewing villagers and compiling composite sketches based on eyewitness accounts. So when I work out in my gym, I always put YouTube videos on or whatever, and I was like, oh cool, cryptozoological channel. And I was watching a video, I think it was Nkele Mbembe video. I was like, wow, this is like super high budget. It looked like a TV show. It was his Genesis Park channel, which I think their channel's called the Ropen something, right? And they were talking, this guy went on expedition there looking for Nkele Mbembe, the long-necked dinosaur animal that's said to live in the Congo. And I was like, this is really well done. And then the religion chat started coming out and the debunking of evolution and all this sorts. And I had to turn it off because, like, I don't care what religion you are. I really doesn't bother me. Great, that's awesome. Do what you have to do. But like, the evidence of evolution is you can witness evolution. You can literally take bacterias and things like that and watch them evolve into different species of bacteria. Like it's insane. Hence why we haven't found any fossils of poodles, right? Not necessarily evolution, but selective breeding. You can take something that looks like a wolf and turn it into a poodle or a chihuahua, right? Look at how, and that's only in a matter of thousands of years. Imagine what millions of years can do. Anyway, Paul Nation. He's done a few expeditions. Guarantee ya he's a creationist. In 2006, videotaped 2 slowly pulsating lights on a ridge. Locals referred to a similar creature called Indava. Obviously, Papua New Guinea's not by any means a small island, right? It may look small on a map, but they're big, right? And obviously you've got like the Indonesian part of Papua and Papua New Guinea, things like that, all have different tribes, different dialects, even different languages. So there's going to be colloquial terms for the same animal, multiple different names for this same animal, even if it's found in similar locations. Paul Nation in 2007, he's been a busy ball? Because his name's Paul. Oh, I'm an idiot. He's been a busy man. He videoed... Oh, what? Oh, yeah, he did a follow-up expedition attempting further documentation of the Indava or Ropen lights. And did he find anything? We don't know, because it doesn't say. In the 2000s, so from 2000 to 2020, there's been lots of various local researchers. That's cool. See, that's what they need. When there is something that is unknown to Western science, often it's been known to the locals for centuries or millennia before that. And to them, it's just a normal animal. But to us, it's like, oh my God, this is crazy. But to them, it's like, really? You didn't know about the Ropen? Like, we've known about it for ages. So getting locals to basically go out there and, document said animal is the way to do it. Unless you're going to spend years there trying to find this thing, like, get the help of the locals, all right? Because they're the ones that live there. They're the ones that most of the eyewitness reports come from. They named the bloody thing. Get them to document these things. And they got continued anecdotal reports of glowing flyers, no physical evidence, verified by science. Mainstream view attributes sightings to misidentified bats, birds, or folklore. Yeah, so There has been a few photographs and videos of said Ropen. Not just lights, but the actual animal itself. And I will say not one of them shows a pterosaur, a living pterosaur flying around. In fact, all the ones that do show something that looks like a pterosaur is actually a frigate bird. Now, that may sound weird. How the hell do you mistake a pterosaur for a frigate bird? Google photos of frigate birds from a distance and with the light sort of behind it, so you just sort of see the silhouette, and it looks so much like a prehistoric flying reptile, it's not even funny. They've got this long tail that could pass for a reptilian-like tail, and they have like the bill just looks so pterosaur-like, it's crazy, like absolutely crazy, and I do not blame anybody for mistaking the silhouette or a faraway photo of a frigate bird for a pterosaur, because it's actually mind-blowing how much they look like them. But apart from like a lot of these people were young Earth creationists, sorry, which is concerning. It is concerning because they don't come into this with a scientific mind. A scientific mind is, okay, there's the hypothesis. Can this happen? Is this there? Blah, blah, blah. Let's go out and find evidence and build up evidence to sort of strengthen that hypothesis. When you are already 100% convinced that something is there, this is that, you know, there's no, and try and build up the backstory to fit that narrative, that's when you get like confirmation bias, where everything that people say is true, is you know, set in stone. And we know that anecdotal evidence isn't really scientific evidence. So, oh, he said he saw this, she said he saw that, blah, 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 and go, oh, well, then it must exist. There's a reason why anecdotal evidence is kind of one of the lowest form of evidence, because people's memories change, people misidentify things, people lie. They absolutely do. And also, especially in places like Papua New Guinea, Indonesian New Guinea, things like that, there is folklore. And to a lot of these tribes and locals, the distinction between folklore and reality, there basically isn't a distinction. Folklore is almost as real to them as just real life. So they also describe the Ropen as being like a spirit as well, which does sort of murky the waters a little bit. And I've known cases of, you know, cryptids that one tribe will tell you, oh, it's a real animal, and another tribe will say, no, it's a ghost or it's a spirit. It's not a real animal. It's you know, a spiritual being. So you've got the same sort of thing on Papua New Guinea. And I guarantee you, when some of these people are telling these people that are researching the Ropen that, oh, it's a spirit, something tells me they leave that out, right? They go, oh, okay, we won't be putting that in the report. Oh, it's a spiritual animal, it's not a physical animal. Oh, okay, we'll just leave that one out. You there, is it a physical real animal? Yeah. Oh, yeah, we'll put that in, you know? So that's what happens when you have a set narrative and the confirmation bias kicks in. You tend to sort of pick and choose what evidence and information you put in there, so it all looks out like, oh, wow. Same thing with Mkele and Bembe, to be honest. A lot of the tribes in that area say that it's a spiritual animal, or it's a water sprite, or it's, you know, a river spirit, more so than an actual physical biological animal. And obviously that kind of gets brushed under the couch there, and oh, we'll just pretend he didn't say that. So it can get quite confusing. And it is annoying that most of the researchers looking into these sort of cryptids do have that sort of that mindset. It is quite frustrating. Um, with the Nkelembembe, just the fact that it resembles a saurian animal or a sauropod dinosaur, like a Apatosaurus, doesn't necessarily mean it's a dinosaur and it just never died during the extinction of the dinosaurs. For some reason, just because it looks like a dinosaur doesn't mean it is a dinosaur, if you know what I mean. Look at birds. Birds come from a group of dinosaurs that we call archosaurs. Archosaurs are crocodiles and birds. Birds are direct descendants from theropod dinosaurs. So when people say birds are dinosaurs, yeah, they absolutely are. Birds are direct descendants from dinosaurs. They're not like dinosaurs didn't evolve into birds. Birds were evolving alongside dinosaurs. And some of the raptors were fully feathered to the point where if you saw let's say a velociraptor in the forest somewhere, you wouldn't probably think it was a dinosaur. You would think it was just a large, odd-looking bird. That's how much they looked like birds and how feathered they were. Obviously, they had teeth, which modern birds don't have. But some of the other species of raptor, there was some debate whether or not they could actually fly. Now, there were probably some smaller raptors, and the velociraptor was actually quite small, was nowhere near the size of the raptors in Jurassic Park. They're more sort of Deinonychus size. But the velociraptors in real life were maybe 6 feet long, including the super long tail, and stood probably no higher than a bulldog. And there was some debate whether or not they could glide from a tree. And then obviously from there we had animals like the Archaeopteryx, which is basically the first sort of modern bird. It's basically like the transitional species from like reptile-y dinosaur to legitimate bird. And it's probably the first that could take flight, that could actually fly. And they got some really good fossils of Archaeopteryx in Germany, fully preserved fossils of Archaeopteryx. Basically just looked like a bird with teeth and has sort of long sort of tail feathers. But if you saw it flapping around the place, you wouldn't look twice. You'd just think it was a bird. I don't quite know where I was going with this. Oh yeah, so with Mbembe, for example, just because it resembles a long-necked dinosaur doesn't mean it is. It could be a case of convergent evolution where, for example, you look at a shark and you look at a dolphin. Yes, they're caudal fins, so their tail fins are different, but structurally they are very similar. They've got pectoral fins, dorsal fins, things like that, and they are torpedo-shaped. But they are from completely different lineages of animal. We can look at bats and birds. Both of them have wings, both of them fly, yet they are completely different animals. So convergent evolution is where animals sort of tend to look like each other and evolve similar traits, even though they're from completely different sort of lineages, because the environmental pressures are the same. So they evolve to have similar tools to each other to sort of fix that problem of whatever environmental pressure it is. So if you look at Mbembe, long-necked sauropod type animal, look at a giraffe, right? They are browsers. They eat leaves high up in the tree. They have a long neck, just like an Apatosaurus. So that could be a reason why the Mbembe has a long neck. It's a browser. We know there are animals with long necks today. And also it has a tail very similar to a sauropod dinosaur. Now, that one's a weird one, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it can't exist. It's just maybe a type of mammal. I don't believe Mkelembembe is a reptile. If it exists, I think if it does exist, it is a mammal that has evolved to be a browser, because it's a browser, have a long neck. Maybe it has a large sauropod-like tail because it needs it for balance, right? Because it doesn't have sort of, a bulky, large body and shorter back legs like giraffes to sort of like counterbalance it. So a long tail would suffice. Anyway, what I'm saying is just because it looks like a pterosaur, like the Ropen, looks like a Patasaurus, like Mkelembembe, doesn't mean it's a dinosaur. Just means it is an animal that looks like dinosaurs. Okay? That's what I'm getting at. But anyway, the Ropen, there is an account of it eating somebody. And I'll read that to you. This is actually a more elaboration on Dwayne Hodgkinson's sighting in Papua New Guinea in 1944. So he was a fighter pilot. No conflict of interest there, religion-wise. During World War II, as he and another military man were moving through thick vegetation, they heard a loud, startling sound. They came to a clearing and a creature made a few steps through the trail and took off. Dwayne was astonished at the time because, according to him, it was a pterodactyl. It had a long snout on it, a long appendage coming out the back of its head, like, pterodactyls do, and great big wings. Actually, no, this is a different sighting. Anyway, disregard that. But still, that's an elaboration of his sighting. The eating person thing came in 1986. The location of a former military base in Papua New Guinea. And it was a sighting of a killing by a Ropen. A man was gardening, and the creature, a very large one evidently, came down and picked him up, flew to about 40 feet off the ground, dropped him. By the time he hit the ground, he was either dead or incapacitated. The creature then came back, picked him back up, and took him up into the trees and started eating him right in front of the village. See, this is a weird one because it's like, yes, we have a date, which kind of like goes, okay, there's a date. That's a nice detail. But it doesn't have any names of who witnessed this. Surely, you'd get some names if it was the entire village that saw it. But yeah, that's pretty crazy. I'm just trying to think what the weight of prey an animal like that could pick up. With a 25-foot wingspan, let's say this bloke gardening, Papua New Guineans aren't the biggest people. Let's say he weighed 60 kilograms, okay? I don't know what that is in pounds, 150 pounds, let's say. Let's say it was 60 kilograms, 25 foot. We know a 10-foot, let's say, eagle. There's no way an eagle with a 10-foot wingspan could pick up 30 kilos. That probably would be a very, very big stretch for an eagle, considering eagles and also flying reptiles like pterosaurs had lots of air in their bones. They had very sort of hollowy bones to make them way lighter, which is more conducive of flight. So if you look at, for example, the largest animal that ever flew was Quetzalcoatlus, a pterosaur. It stood about the height of a giraffe and had a 10 to 12 meter or 33 to 39 foot wingspan. All right. So this is an animal as tall as a giraffe when standing and a 39 foot wingspan. Yet the weight estimates for this animal landed about 75 to 80 kilograms. How crazy is that? Given the size of that animal and potentially only weighing 80 kilograms is insane. So although they are big, they are very light because they have to be to take flight. I don't think an animal with a 25-foot wingspan could pick up a 60-kilogram man. So there is a discrepancy there. But that's, assuming it did have a 25-foot wingspan. If it was any more than that, then potentially, but yeah, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. And given the fact that pterosaurs were, this one's said to be a fish eater, why would it go for a man that could potentially eat it when, the waters of Papua New Guinea are very rich with fish? Wouldn't it be more likely it's like just goes up to a fisherman and steals his catch or something like that, rather than a dude that's holding like a gardening hoe? And I'm not saying he's a pimp with his hose, a gardening hoe, and could potentially mess that animal up. So yeah, it is an interesting cryptid. I think there's something going on Papua New Guinea regarding flying things. I cannot disregard the video footage of the lights, but I cannot necessarily completely attribute those lights to the Ropen. It would be very unusual for an animal like a pterosaur to be bioluminescent. I'm just trying to think what benefit that would have it. Maybe because of its size, it would have no natural predators, so it doesn't matter if it stands out or not to any predators. And maybe it uses the bioluminescence to attract fish flying around, maybe. That could be something, that, a reason for why it would bioluminesce. It's not like Twilight, like, look at me sparkle. So yeah, it is an interesting cryptid. I'm not completely poo-pooing it. But I think probably our best bet is getting the locals out there, hook them up with some video cameras, and yeah, see what they can come up with. That would be your best bet. Anyway, that is my episode on the Ropen. I'll see you next time in another episode of Thorn's Jungle. Take care.